Hello, everyone, and happy Mother's Day. I hope everyone is celebrating all the wonderful mothers out there. Mothers come in all shapes and forms, yet the work is difficult and sometimes underappreciated. So hopefully you are having the opportunity to celebrate your mother or the mother in your life. If you haven't yet and you are instead hanging out with me today, let's go ahead and remember some of the, or at least acknowledge some of the lessons of the mothers in our lives as we begin the process of navigating the Small Business Administration's Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And if you are watching this video or watching the replay, this conversation is highly geared towards food and beverage professionals, hospitality professionals, small and independent restaurant owners, culinary professionals who have been impacted by COVID-19. As we all know, COVID-19 has had a huge impact on America's $1 trillion restaurant industry. And as a result, things have just been a little bit difficult for not only the way that we are accessing the way that we get our meals and the way that we get our food, but then the requirements, the operational framework, the business requirements that small restaurant owners are having to deal with. And so today, Food Tribe wanted to go as part of our restaurant bailout initiative, an initiative we launched last year as a result of a challenge by Berea Pasta, was to identify some ways, some opportunities for us to help create some stimulus within the restaurant industry in light of COVID-19, in light of some of the civic and social unrest that we saw as a country last year. And so as part of that challenge, we have offered our restaurant bailout initiative, which is diving into research opportunities. Food Tribe as a technology company has just really been listening in order to figure out, hey, well, just what are some of the ways that we can come together as a community in order to bail out America's favorite industry. Let's be honest, we all like to eat. And so today's workshop is an example of some of that research, some of that training, some of that development that we've been doing as a result of that challenge by Berea. And so, we hope that you find some value here today. If you are, one of those individuals in our target, someone who might find value in this conversation, or if you know someone who could potentially find value in this conversation, please be sure to invite them or to share this piece of content with them, once you have the opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got a presentation that we're going to share. Before we hop into that, I want us to just watch this quick overview video, which outlines the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Oops, give me a bit, y'all. Okay. Make sure that my sound is shared also. Okay. And let's Okay, so hopefully that was a good overview for us to help set the tone for today's conversation. We've got a bit of a presentation that we will spend some time on. If we get some guests in here that are interested in asking some questions, we'll be sure to do that as well. But I do want to get us started with today's training so that we can then all get back to enjoying our Mother's Day. Getting ready to start sharing my screen again, guys. There we go. Okay. All right, fantastic. So as I mentioned, Food Tribe's Restaurant Bailout Initiative got started last year just as a result of, some of the panic that we were seeing in the restaurant industry. We were realizing, hey, you know what? 2020, COVID-19, this is a huge moment in time in history. Who knows exactly what type of ramifications, what type of impact, the loss in revenue to the industry as a whole, what sort of ripple effects that would have on the larger economy of the United States. So, at a time when we were seeing, some corporate bailouts and, Congress and the United States government were trying to figure out different ways to, keep some of our other industries in business, including, like the banking industry and the financial industry and, some of the other industries important to the American economy. Food Tribe was really advocating for a way to bail out, what we believe was an overlooked industry, which is our restaurant industry, which is so important to the food, to the food system and to the food that we all eat as a country, right? And so, at a time when it felt like the U.S. government was ignoring the restaurant industry, Food Tribe was really doing our best to advocate on behalf of the restaurant industry. And this all started out as a community initiative. Conversation with some friends turned into, a full-blown campaign. We met over a course of 6 weeks, and that's when, the challenge with Berea started. And so here we are today. And, we are proud to say that in addition to having put on some really great events and have been diving into this research and development process to, so that we could then begin ideating on some potential solutions to the economic disaster that we saw last year and continue to see this year. But we met like a lot of friends along the way. We formed a board, and we've got some really exciting events that are taking place through the end of the year. We had in February, we had our Food and Science Symposium, which was really about helping our restaurant and our food industry dive into the science of their food. And our upcoming event, Food Mania, is all about getting America excited about eating and dining again. And so, thank you so much for being here. We will continue to have workshops just like this throughout the course of the year, as part of our commitment, as part of the challenge that we received from Berea, but more importantly, because Food Tribe is just such a close ally of the restaurant industry, of the restaurants particularly in South Los Angeles, that we want to make sure that we're doing our best to do what we do, which is connect good people to good food. And as part of that, we make food data, food reports, food stories a lot more digestible and a lot easier to understand. And so, recently, the United States federal government announced a program known as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, or introduced some policy that then helped create the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And some of this is some of this data, some of this information can be a little confusing, a little overwhelming. And so Food Tribe is here to make it a little bit easier. And so on that note, let's go ahead and get started. But, before we officially kick off, let's just go ahead and set the tone. One thing that we learned with our Food and Science Symposium in February is that sometimes it's difficult separating out the fiction of from fact, right? Sometimes we hear stories and it's difficult for us to understand, what's real and what's not real. no greater example of that, at least for us, was George Washington Carver, who George Washington Carver was an important American. Not only was he an Afrofuturist, but he was a scientist, an agriculturalist, excuse me. He was a poet. He was an artist, a very fascinating man. But he is sometimes incorrectly accredited with being the inventor of the peanut, which is not actually, or excuse me, inventor of peanut butter, excuse me, pardon me, which is not accurate. That's fiction, right? But the fact of the matter is that George Washington Carver did create 300 uses of the peanut, right? Which is equally, equally, if not more impressive than having created peanut butter, which is such a cultural phenomenon. But, one thing that Mr. Carver is accredited correctly with saying is that when you do the common things in life in an uncommon way, you will command the attention of the world. And so, I'm just super proud of the fact that, at a time when a lot of our competitors in the market were making recommendations on, how to dive into this problem of bailing out the restaurant industry, what Food Tribe decided to separate ourselves out from the pack, and that, we fully admitted that we actually didn't have the solution. We didn't know, or we still are struggling to figure out, well, hey, what is the right mix of things to do in order to bail out the restaurant industry? And, rather than, just taking people's money and making promises that we couldn't deliver upon, for us, it was a little bit more important to dive into the actual fact of the matters, right? So that we could then start really defining some solid ways that are going to bail out some solid ways, some solid ideas, some solid programs that could bail out the restaurant industry, that made added the most amount of value to our partners, including the restaurants that we worked with, but that, was also allowing them to get ahead in a post-pandemic world versus being, held to a partner or program that just ultimately never worked for them. And so, we just take this quote from George Washington Carver to heart, yeah, and I think that continues to inspire some of the work that we're doing. So obviously, you guys you are all here. You are invited to help bail out America's restaurants with Food Tribe. And, one really easy way of doing that is by taking our survey. We want to know how, and that's part of our research, right? It's how has eating and dining changed for you in light of COVID-19? How are you are you going to restaurants differently? Are you more nervous? What's your experience like? All of this is valuable information, data, so that Food Tribe can then begin the process of interpreting it in order to help make this information, your behaviors, your changes, what your experience is like, into a potential solution. And that's what we've been working through with some of our events. So I'll be sure to drop a link in the comment section wherever this is posted with a link to our survey. Please, 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 take this survey. We want to get as many survey results as possible. We want to know you. We want to know your experience so that we can invite you along this journey with us to bail out America's restaurant industry. Okay. So the question that we are all here to get the answer to is just what in the heck is the SBA Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and what does it have to do with me? Why do I care? Which is a totally valid question, right? We've already established the fact that COVID-19 decimated America's $1 trillion restaurant industry, right? Which saw a decrease of over 2 million jobs year over year, which is huge considering, America has about 300 million people. So if we then consider, where those jobs went, we then have to start making some guesses, some assumptions on how that loss of revenue is then going to impact some of the other industries that that exist in our country. And so, essentially what the SBA Restaurant Revitalization Fund is I mean, it's quite literally what it sounds like. It's a fund in order to help America, recover, revitalize itself from the devastating results of COVID-19. And so, one of his first acts as president, Mr. Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan Act, which established the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. He did this with some quick work across Congress. This initiative, this piece of legislation was, I believe, spearheaded by Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer. And so, essentially what it did is it allocated a bank, really a fund, that then allowed the U.S. Small Business Administration to distribute funds or grants, or some of these dollars to America's restaurants, right? And restaurants is a very broad definition. We know that restaurants in this instance are inclusive of like food stands and food trucks, food carts, caterers, bars, saloons, like a whole bunch of food focused organizations. And so as part of this, like we certainly understand, like, well, hey, okay, well, I fall into one of these categories. How do I get some of this money, right? Which is why we're all here today. This conversation, in addition to giving an overview of what the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is and why you should care about it. We're also going to dive into the program a little bit more, understand eligibility, some of the documentation that's going to be required. We're going to spend some time on the SBA website so that we can dive into some of this content, some of these topics a little bit more, so that you guys can familiarize yourself with the process, get an understanding of all this like complex data that is existing. And we're going to try to streamline this process for you. So bear with me while I grab my notes, please. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to move over to the SBA site. And so the URL is, I will drop the URL in the comment section, but it's an sba.gov/funding programs is where you're going to want to get started. And this is what's going to have, a little bit more of the data, a little bit more of the information regarding the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Right. So again, this program provides emergency assistance for eligible restaurants, bars, and other qualifying businesses impacted by COVID-19. And so, some of this content, again, this is like really great content. It's just a lot of information, a lot of data to, try to make sense of. So my recommendation is, certainly head over to the site, and before you apply, just familiarize yourself with all of this like great content, great information. We're talking through a lot of this content today, right? Specifically regarding program details, how you can get help with your application, who is eligible, how much money you are, potentially eligible for, et cetera, et cetera. So, but this is just my first recommendation is just like seek out information, right? Like, certainly I know that your business is probably struggling right now and you're excited to, get some dollars. But I think that it's more important for you to do it intelligently, right? If you take your time with it, you might find out, something. I mean, you might find out you might have missed something, right? Or you might find something that impacts the amount of money that you're eligible for, or maybe you made some wrong assumptions. So the idea is that you have an abundance of information, so that you can make the most informed decision on how to go about applying for some of these funds. And so, I think that the biggest thing that I want us to remember, excuse me, whoops. The biggest thing that we want to remember when we are submitting our applications is that there's a maximum of $10 million total, $5 million per location, which is, obviously, like, if you are applying for up to $5 million, or for that $5 million of funding, that then is going to be dependent on, you're going to have to prove some things, right? That's going to be dependent on, like, the amount of revenue that you generated in the previous year, which we'll talk about. But then also, on the other end of the extreme is that the minimum funding amount is going to be $1,000, right? And so again, like, this is information, this is data that you have to quantify, or you have to explain based off of your taxes, right? Like, or, some sort of like documentation that, verifies like your revenue. So if you don't meet either of those requirements, applications that are seeking less than $1,000 are just going to be automatically declined. Like, the SBA is not even going to take a look at it. So, just be mindful of that. And then, in terms of like the eligible use of funds, there is a very wide definition, a wide range of, ways that you are able to use the funds, which we'll get into. But I mean, it's quite literally, I mean, anything from like mortgage payment to debt payments to rent payments to payroll. So you do have like a wide range of information, or a wide I guess, choice or net in terms of how you want to spend the money. But do be mindful that there are actual deadlines of, when the money must be used by, and, you then have to, do the hard work, or do the work, I should say, of proving to the SBA that you actually spent the funds within the time frame due. Because otherwise, I believe that you are required to return a portion of the money that you borrowed against. So, just something to consider. So let's go ahead and go back to the SBA site. And we're going to talk a little bit about the program guide that they have available. And so once you navigate over to the SBA Restaurant Revitalization Fund page, if you just click the link on program details, in the supplemental documents section, you're going to see two documents that I recommend you check out. We'll go through the sample application, but first, the recommendation is to go through the program guide. And this is a hefty document. I believe it's 22 pages. And so this is just going to have all the information, all the data that whoever is responsible, within your restaurant or your restaurant business, whether it's you or, your operations manager, your kitchen manager, whoever is responsible for, making sure that you get that application over the deadline, they're going to want to live this document and really understand it. And so, it's, again, it's pretty interactive. You can click around, there are links to, or drop links directly to the different parts of the document. I really wanted to spend this first portion going through the eligibility, which we're just talking about, right? Like, in terms of, okay, well, yeah, I'm a restaurant, right? And there's this very broad definition of what a restaurant is. We've said food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, right? But, if you see here towards the end of this list, and again, this is like, we're seeing like snack and non-alcoholic beverage bars, right? Other similar places of business in which the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. Like, these are really wide definitions of who is eligible to, to apply for the program. But if you fall into a specific category, which the SBA has outlined, which includes bakeries, brew pubs, breweries, microbreweries, wineries, and even inns, you have you have you've been additional requirements that you have to talk through, right? And so that then means you're going to have some additional documentation in order to help supplement your application, right, based off of the category that your restaurant or your food business operates in. So, if you see here, we're at like bakeries, brew pubs, tasting rooms. In order to be eligible, you have to provide documentation that your application, or within your application, excuse me, had on-site sales to the public that can comprise at least 30%, 33% of gross receipts in 2019, right? For inns, it looks like that's the same requirements: 33% of gross receipts in 2019, and at least 33% gross receipts has to be on on-site food and beverage sales to the public, excuse me, right? And then, if we then consider, you know, your business entity, like how you're categorized, right? Well, that, we have to start considering some things, right? Like, are you a C corp, or you like an LLC, or you a sole proprietor, right? Because that then indicates, the valid information or documentation that you're going to need in order to be compliant, right? You have to have your social security number, or maybe you have to have a valid EIN number, right? Your operating status. Like, if you were closed as a result of local mandates on COVID, that doesn't impact you. But if you like weren't open for like, several years, and all of a sudden like you're reopened, et cetera, and then you're trying to, you're trying to make the argument that, you should be eligible for restaurant revitalization funds, you might not meet those requirements, right? So there are some there are some requirements in order to prove your operating status, right? In terms of like any sort of like paper trail or documentation, receipts, right? Anything that you can provide in order to help paint a picture of like, when you're operating, and why, and how COVID-19 impacted how you're able to stay in business, right? So then there are certain terms regarding bankruptcy status. Okay. Something that I also thought was interesting was that, and this is where I would want to get additional clarification. If this is interesting to you, or you receive PPP money and you're looking for additional guidance, let me know. I'll reach out to the SBA this week. I'll get like a coaching call with them regarding the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and see if I can add additional context for you guys. But I did think that it was important that, if you receive the PPP, I'm not sure what the impact a pending PPP application or payment protection program application has on your Restaurant Revitalization Fund application. So I would just be mindful, if you do have an application for payment protection, for the payment protection program in place, on how that will impact your Restaurant Revitalization Fund application. And then also the same thing goes for the emergency disaster relief, the EIDL, and the targeted EIDL grant that was offered last year, and as well. I think that was renewed this year as well. So definitely be mindful of like eligibility, right? Before you even like get the process started of your application, be mindful, like, am I eligible based off of just like the bare minimum of, how much revenue I generated in, the previous year, right? Be mindful of, being able to prove like the fact that you were operating, that you were actually in business, right? Because, then based off of your eligibility, that then is going to inform, getting back to our presentation. Oops. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting a little bit of tech challenge. Okay. So based off of your eligibility, that then outlines the amount of funds that you are eligible for, and then again, like how you can use those funds. So, just being mindful of, all of those things that you will need to consider. And then we've talked a little bit about documentation. Well, what is the documentation that you are going to need in order to supply? Well, at a bare minimum, you are going to need three things. I do think that it's super important to acknowledge the fact that the SBA is going to be prioritizing awarding funds. Read this, let's read this together. The SBA will be prioritizing awarding funds to small businesses that are at least 51% owned and controlled by individuals who are women, veterans, and or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. All right, so women, veterans, and or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. For businesses, 51% or more owned by by those who that fall into those identities or those categories of identity. That then indicates how much of a priority your eligible application is going to receive by the SBA, which obviously indicates, how much money, well, is going to be indicative of how much money you receive and how quickly you're going to receive it, how quickly your application is going to be approved, right? But the bare minimum documentation that you're going to need. So if you don't fall into one of those weird like categories of like an inn or, like a brew pub or a brew pub or a tap room, etc. At bare minimum, you're going to need your SBA form 3172, which again, we're going to check out. You're going to need your verification of tax information, and they've got documents outlined, which we will, walk through in the documentation section. And then they are also requiring documentation for your gross receipts. So let me get out of this share. Okay, let's get back into the SBA doc. So now we want to check out documentation. Okay. Okay. So again, being mindful of how the SBA is going, helping you to calculate the amount of funding that you're eligible for. There is like a whole process for it, but the math is based off of the documentation that you're going to have to provide, right? Which is the amount of revenue that you're able to generate while you were in operation, the amount of sales that you're generating, right? And so they do have a they do provide you with a step-by-step process for calculating the amount of funding that you're eligible for, right? Which begins with your gross receipts, an example of documentation that you're going to have to provide, right? Your gross receipts, the amount of money that you reported on your 2019 federal tax return. You then have to take your gross receipts from 2020, the year that COVID hit, right? Or that is going to be reported on your 2020 taxes, which I believe the deadline has been moved to the 15th or to the 31st. Right, and then step 3 is subtracting the aggregate original disbursement amount. So if you received any PPP, and I believe EIDL, I'm not positive there, don't hold me to that, but that then does indicate, you do have to consider the PPP amount, the payment protection program amount that you received, right? And then again, they have this fourth requirement if you have a physical location that was generating $5 million or more, right? Because you're not eligible to receive more than 10 million. Okay, documentation. So you've got the other use of funds. Well, I guess we just walk through the documentation, the application, and then your tax receipts, right? Okay. If you guys have more questions on documentation, let me know, and I'll be sure to follow up. But I guess that was pretty much it. So let's get back to the presentation so that we can get on out of here. And so we'll go through how to apply. And then from how to apply, we'll go through the sample application that they have on, that the SBA has on their site, and then we'll get on out of here. So again, there are 3 ways, or maybe not again for the first time, but there are 3 ways to apply or to get your application through. You can do it through an SBA recognized restaurant partner. And Food Tribe is actually doing some of that hard work of getting approved by the SBA as a restaurant partner. But these are technology partners that are typically providing point of sale service to your restaurant or food business. And so, you know, if they're, you know, just tread carefully. There's a whole lot of people that are going to tell you, oh yeah, I'll do your application for you, et cetera, et cetera. Like, don't get me, if you don't have the time to do it, no worries, right? You know, pay, and if you got the budget for it, pay someone to do it. But this is all information. This is all data. This is all stuff that you can do on your own, which is why, you know, we're having this workshop today. But, you know, again, like if you are, my recommendation is if you are looking to outsource this application to someone else, be sure to run it through an SBA certified restaurant partner, right? Again, these are organizations that have a direct, or technology organizations, point of sale organizations that have a direct relationship with the SBA in order to help facilitate this application process for you. They probably have like a whole lot more insights than, you know, just like your average Joe Schmo off of the street, right? So be sure to, you know, work through one of their certified restaurant partners. You can apply directly if you feel confident and comfortable applying on your own, or you have like a member of your team that is confident that they can, you know, handle this application process. They can, again, that link that we talked about, restaurants.sba.gov, they can apply directly through there and get their application in, you know, once you have all your supporting materials, your documentation, or you can call over the phone, and over the phone, you can go through the exact same process based off of the supporting materials and documentation that you have. So I think, you know, what's important, I think dates and deadlines are super important for us to consider. And so the biggest of which is, you know, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe that we have had a deadline on when applications are due by. All we know is that they are accepting applications, I believe, on a rolling basis right now. And so what that means is, you know, do your due diligence, get your application in, because, you know, as I understand it, I don't have the dollar amount, which I totally slipped on. I believe it's 26. I'm disappointed I don't have this number. I believe it was 26. Well, let's look it up together, because this is important information that I think we all have. There we go. So the amount is $5 billion that has been allocated for the restaurant industry. Oh no, okay, excuse me. I think that's number, it's 28 billion. Oh goodness, okay, 28.6 billion. Okay, which is very topical and something for us to consider. So, but I mean, 28.6 billion when we consider that the restaurant industry was projected to do 1 trillion in revenue last year. You know, my assumption is that these funds are going to go very, 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 very quickly, right? So being mindful of that, again, just getting back to our time frame, I don't believe that there is a deadline yet, but we do know that there's a finite amount, right? There's only 28.6 billion. So once that 28.6 billion is gone, it's gone. And so we've heard about like who the SBA is looking to target. They're looking to target women, veterans, people who are recognized as socially or economically disadvantaged, right? Those businesses that are 51% owned by those core groups are being prioritized. Their applications are being prioritized based off of this budget of $28.6 billion, right? So you want to get your application in as quickly as possible, because once that money runs out, it runs out. The hard work of once the money is like, then you've got your application through and then distributed, like it's not done, right? So that's what I want us to all consider. It's not like you can just get this money and then spend it and then just go on your merry way, which you technically can, right? However, you do have to meet certain requirements, including like a time frame for, not like, but including a time frame for when you must use the funds by. And so again, you must use the fund, or not again, but you must use the funds by March 11, 2023 on those eligible expenses that we talked about earlier in the presentation, right? And so if you're unable to use all of the funds on eligible expenses by that March 11, 2023 date, any of those unused funds must be returned to the government, right? So something for us to consider. This is why documentation, receipts are important, keeping track of our finances, right? And the reason why this is important is because the SBA specifically called out that they are looking to validate that you have used the funds, and so you are then required, up until March 11th, 2023, to validate the fact that you have used the funds. So just something to be mindful of, right? Like, I know it might seem like something small, but it has a potential to bite you in the butt if you haven't been smart about it. Okay. So now we're gonna go through one of the sample applications that they've got on the site. And then maybe we can pull up a video on YouTube to see if there's any additional information that we want to check out before I get you on out of here. Okay. I'm just pulling up the sample application, y'all. There we go. Okay. So the sample application is found, and so the name of that the document is important too. But it's found under the supplemental documents section of that Restaurant Revitalization homepage that we went through. And so it's called the SBA Form 3172, SBA Form 3172. And again, they will help you with your application. You can call the SBA and they'll help you with your application. There are a ton of resources on the SBA YouTube channel, their Instagram. So I highly recommend that you check them out, right? But again, just like as part of this process, just familiarize yourself with it so that it's not overwhelming. You can do your application in chunks and sections, right? Maybe you want to collect all your information, your documentation before you do anything, before you write anything down, right? Or maybe you want to read through someone else's application. Well, that's what we're doing here. And so, again, just some of the data. This is data that we talked about, right? But things that you are going to need: your legal business name. Are you a DBA? Are you doing business as? What's your business address? right? Your tax identification number. And we all know, like, we have access to this information, but it's just the like compiling it and getting it into one place, right? Do you have multiple owners that you are responsible for, you know, getting all of their data? What sort of application are you submitting? This doesn't look to be like an editable document. I will ask the SBA, again, I'm gonna making a commitment to reach out to them this week. I will ask them if you have the opportunity to fill. It doesn't seem like they're accepting digital applications, but I'll double check on that. But you know, just you can download it, you can and print it out and you know, fill out your application. Or again, you know, you can do it through, like, if you have Adobe Acrobat, you can do it in Acrobat. Acrobat is a free software that will help you edit PDF documents if you're unfamiliar. Okay, and so then that's when you have to, you know, and some of this, the way that they phrase some of these questions is a little bit wonky. Like, as of March 13th, 2020, owns or operates together with more than 20 locations. You know, it's like, it's just really reading through things carefully in order to understand exactly what they're asking. You know, are you telling the right story in terms of your data? Excuse me. You know, like when you were operating, or when you're a business, or when you began becoming impacted by COVID-19, right? You know, again, how does your food business identify? Are you a restaurant? Are you a caterer? Are you a bakery? Right? Because if you're a bakery or a brewery, you're gonna have to provide some additional context and some additional information. So, you know, I want you all to, you know, spend your own time on this. I think the most difficult and the section that you're probably going to want to allocate the most amount of your time with is the calculation of funding, right? Which is super important, you know, just in terms of that's going to be unique to you and your business, and you have to be able to tell the story with the numbers, right? And so, you know, just come prepared with some of your if you need to have like your financial person, your tax person, whoever owns this data, they certainly are gonna, you know, want to spend a lot of time here, just making sure that your information, your numbers are correct, so that you get the most amount of money that you're eligible for, and that you don't miss out on anything. On that note, we are just about done. I do want to spend some time checking out the SBA's, or excuse me, checking out YouTube to see if there's any relevant content that maybe we want to check out regarding the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So let's just have a little fun together and see. Let's do some YouTubing. Let's do some YouTubing. Okay. Revitalization Fund. Okay, so it looks like there are a couple of tutorials. I don't want to speak. Yeah, see, and this is, we're seeing some links regarding PPP loans and how that might impact you. Looking at the Restaurants Act of 2021 is what some people are calling it. Let's see, okay, so it looks like the SBA provides an in-depth application. Oh no, that's older. Let's see, let's add the Small Business Administration. See if we get better results. Yeah, see, they've got like a whole webinar, y'all, which, I mean, let's check out a little bit of it. And there are a ton of resources, so it doesn't have to be super difficult.
All right, we'll give a few minutes or a
Let's, I'll share some of my audio too, so, okay.
few seconds for folks to
Let's speed that up.
first look at what you'll
ins, you will need to demonstrate that you had 33% or greater on-site sales for food and beverage in 2019. You do not need to demonstrate that for 2020.
I'm going to speed it
I
up.
recognize that those wholesale businesses probably pivoted, and then obviously the pandemic impacted on-site sales in 2020. In terms of eligible expenses for this program, if we can jump to that slide, Nicola. So as far as eligible expenses, the business expenses, any expenses, rent, payroll, utilities, maintenance expenses, including depreciation, but not accelerated depreciation, business supplies, food and beverage expenses, including raw material, so hops if you're a brewery, covered supplier costs, and then all operating expenses, including insurance, marketing fees, licensing fees, everybody's favorite, legal fees, and all business-related costs for any of your eligible entity. As far as expansion costs, they are not eligible. So expanding to new locations, expanding indoor seating, expanding a drive-through, expanding your truck fleet, your food stand fleet, that is not eligible. However, construction of outdoor seating is an eligible capital expenditure project with eligible expenses, and any equipment that breaks on existing locations would be eligible to replace as eligible expenses, including if a food truck breaks down, it's part of your existing fleet. When you apply for the award, you can replace it. Business debt, any business debt from a owner-occupied mortgage, principal and interest payments, and then business debt includes equipment leasing, equipment loans, credit card debt, working capital loans, any SBA loans, any EIDL loans. You can't prepay, but you can set aside proceeds from your award to make principal and interest payments each month up until March 11th, 2023. As far as the calculations, let's move forward to that quickly. For calculation 1, you've been in business before January 1, 2019, so you have a location or locations that were in business prior to January 1st, 2019. You'll take your 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 gross receipts minus any PPP loan amount. For calculation 2, you'll take the average monthly gross receipts in 2019, you'll times that by 12, you'll minus 2020 gross receipts and minus your PPP loan amounts. And then finally, calculation 3, you'll take, this is for applicants that began operations on or between January 1st, 2020 and March 10th, 2021, and applicants not yet open but have incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. You'll take the total.
There is a wealth of resources available to us, and I will be sure to drop this link in the comment section as well. But I mean, this doesn't have to be like a super, I don't want to make it seem like it's going to be easy, because it might be a pain in the butt. Let's just go ahead and admit it, right? But it doesn't have to be overwhelming. There's help available to you. Food Tribe wants to help you throughout this process. Again, we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. So we want to, be as mindful of, what we're actually good at versus, us just like offering some help. But we're here. If you need some like advice, some coaching, or additional resources, feel free to reach out directly to me at Terrence. That's TERE, N as in Nancy, CE, at foodtribeusa.co. That's foodtribeusa.co, and I'll be sure to follow up and see what the best way for us to support you. Again, we are continuing to dive into this topic of how to bail out the restaurant industry. So this is just one of the resources, one of the things that you can do is taking advantage of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund in order to get you the resources or some of the finances that your business needs to stay open, right? But that's not it. COVID-19 has impacted the way that we eat and dine forever. And so it's just a matter of understanding how COVID-19 is impacting the way that we're eating and dining. And Food Tribe continues that work through our research and development. So if you would do us a favor and take our survey, again, I'll drop a link for you in the comment section, but the link will outline, or will be a direct link to the survey, which will help us to get an understanding of how eating and dining has changed for you, what some of your pain points are, some of the problems that you're facing, the challenges that you're facing, so that we can start developing some solutions that will continue to help build out the restaurant industry. Only other thing that I have before I get you out of here is that at the end of this month, Food Tribe is having our Food Mania event, which is all about helping America, specifically South LA, get excited about eating and dining again. And we can't wait to have you participate. More details to come. Thank you so much for joining me and the Food Tribe team today, and can't wait to see you again. Peace, love, and light.